One of the biggest talking points for the Minnesota Timberwolves this offseason has been their point guard spot because it's kind of the one position on the roster where you take a look at where they are and you don't really know what it's going to look like next season. Because everywhere else, at shooting guard, you got the face of the franchise, an undeniable superstar in Anthony Edwards. At small forward, you got Jay McDaniels, lockdown defender who has shown flashes of his potential offensively. And as for the bigs, you got Naz Reid, Julius Randle, and Rudy Gobert. So you know what all those other positions might look like. But at point guard, it's a little bit more uncertain. And the $1 million question is that of Mike Conley. Because last year, he just didn't look the same. And Mike Conley is someone who's beloved by pretty much every Minnesota fan and the majority of NBA fans, and rightfully so. But last year, he just didn't look the same. Even the stuff that might have been his bread and butter, he wasn't executing it to the same extent. And for the most part, Mike Conley has been relatively stable in Minnesota. He hasn't, hit the same heights that he once had, but you could trust what you were getting out of him. But there were moments this past season where it was a little bit more uncertain. You didn't really know. And that's okay. That comes with age. Father time comes for everyone. And Mike Conley, with his IQ, he's going to be impactful no matter what. But I think going to next year, he is not the solidified absolute starter. I think at the very least, even if he is starting, you could definitely see his minutes decrease. And if that is to be the case, the biggest question there is who's going to be his successor? Who's going to be the next point guard for Minnesota? And I think a lot of people they want to look and they want to say Rob Dillingham, and rightfully so. This is someone who was the number 7 pick, and he's a very exciting player with a major offensive ceiling. And then you pair that with the defensive capabilities of an Anthony Edwards or Jaden McDaniels on the perimeter, you can mask his defensive flaws and focus on what he does great for you offensively. That seems like a pretty good fit. But there is one player that I don't think gets brought up enough because, yes, Rob Dillingham is absolutely an exciting player. He's going to have a bright future, and the hype around him is warranted. But someone who I don't think gets brought up enough in those conversations is Terrance Shannon Jr. And it feels like, to me at least, that this is a very good option for Minnesota at that point guard spot, and someone that a lot of people they just don't talk about enough. And I think TSJ could shock a lot of people next season. And I've got two major reasons for this. One is I think that Chris Finch trusts him quite a bit. Because Finch, as we've seen with the likes of a Wendell Moore, he doesn't always necessarily like putting his young players, or Leonard Miller, he doesn't like putting these guys into the rotation very early on in their careers. You even see that with Rob Dillingham. He puts out the guys that he trusts most first, and that's usually the guys who have been around for a little bit, the more veterans of the game. But this season, we kind of saw a little bit of a shift in that. We saw Terrance Shannon Jr. kind of crack into that rotation. And so what I take away from that is that I think Chris Finch, I think he trusts Terrance Shannon Jr. And that's more than he trusts a lot of young players, because Josh Minott, Wendell Moore, Leonard Miller, Rob Dillingham, early on in their careers, they didn't find themselves getting a lot of minutes. But Terrance Shannon Jr., he managed to crack their rotation. And so with it, I think, if you're looking for a successor to Mike Conley, Finch is going to go to who he trusts. And Rob Dillingham might have the higher ceiling, but I think Finch trusts Terrance Shannon Jr. just as much, if not more. Especially considering the Timberwolves, they probably view themselves as being within a championship window, having made the conference finals in back-to-back seasons. You're going to want to put out there guys who trust to help you win now, and I think that's how Chris Finch views Terrance Shannon Jr. So I think we could absolutely see him get an even bigger role this year, based off what we saw from him last season, which kind of was bucking the trends of a young player in a Chris Finch offense. And my second point here is his defense. Because if the Minnesota Timberwolves have any kind of identity, it is through their defense. Just looking at that starting five, you've, of course, got Jay McDaniels and Rudy Gobert, who are elite on that end of the court. And then you've got Anthony Edwards, who, for a superstar, is one of the best defenders in the league. Because typically when you got a superstar, especially in the modern NBA, the focus for them is pretty much always on offense. Look at Luka Doncic, look at Nikola Jokic. That's not to say that they are absolutely terrible defenders at all times, especially with Jokic, but their bread and butter is their offense. And so no matter what they do for you on defense, that doesn't matter as much as what they can do for you as your primary creator, your offensive hub. But Anthony Edwards, he makes his impact on both ends of the court. And so having your leader take pride in what he does for you on both ends and hustle his heart out on defense, that sets the tone for your entire team to have a defensive identity. In terms of setting the tone, how about Julius Randle? Someone who I think a lot of times this past season, he seemed really bought into what the Timberwolves were trying to do. And he really fit into his role very, very well, more so than he did with the Knicks. There wasn't a power struggle. Ant was the guy, and Randall, he played his role perfectly. He didn't do too much for your own offense, and he was able to be a pretty decent defender, especially with his size, with his build. He's not the best defender in the world, but that allowed him to be able to match up with some pretty tough opponents, like even LeBron James in that first round playoff series. So this team has a defensive identity around them, and I think TSJ fits in that pretty well. A very good on ball defender. And to have that kind of point of attack guy that can be an on ball defender, I think that adds a whole nother element to this defense. Because you got Gobert being an elite rim protector in the post. Then you got Jaden McDaniels doing a little bit of everything. Then you got Ant who takes on some on ball responsibilities. To add TSJ to that mix as another on ball defender that allows Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards to play even more so into their own flow and not have to be on ball, even though they are incredible on ball, especially J Mac. That would allow even for their offense to flourish even greater because Ant could maybe even focus more on his offense. And same thing with J McDaniels, because there's something with J Mac offensively that he just hasn't quite tapped into yet. So those two are going to obviously have major defensive responsibilities, especially McDaniels. But TSJ can unlock their offense as well by alleviating a little bit of that pressure with his very good on ball defense. So he fits in that defensive culture. And I think also you tie back into that first point. I think that's a big reason why Chris Finch trusts him because he knows what TSJ can do for you not only on offense but defense. And with this team having a defensive identity, that can help you to win now. And so a lot of the hype goes behind Rob Dillingham, and rightfully so. But if we are looking at a point guard who's going to step in immediately and make a good impact, I think Terrance Shannon Jr. can surprise a lot of people. And when it comes to the succession of Mike Conley, I don't think you only have one good answer. I think you have two. And if they're able to keep both Rob Dillingham and Terrance Shannon Jr. around at least for the next couple years until maybe they got to make a decision, I think they're going to be in very good hands. So watch out for Terrance Shannon Jr. on the Timberwolves next season. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people, and I think he's fine under the radar, but he's got the talent. He's got what Chris Finch likes, and he could be a big contributor.